One blown meeting. That's all it takes to erase 200 good days from your manager's memory. You might think that's unfair. It is unfair, in a sense, but not in the way most people assume. This isn't your manager playing favorites. It's not a grudge, and it's not personal at all. It's a wiring flaw baked into how every human brain stores memory, and psychologists gave it a name decades ago, the von Restorff Effect. Here's the simple version. Show someone a list of ordinary words, all printed in black ink, except one word printed in red. Ask them an hour later to recall the list. They will remember that red word far better than any of the black ones. It's not that the red word meant more. It wasn't even a different kind of word. It just looked different. It broke a pattern, and a brain built to notice change over routine locked onto it and held on, while the black words faded into an undifferentiated blur. Now swap the ink for people. Swap the word list for a year of work. A quiet, dependable performer who ships good work, sprint after sprint, month after month, becomes background noise. Not because the work is bad, because it's consistent. Consistency, by definition, produces no contrast. There's nothing for the brain's pattern detector to flag. Every Tuesday looks like every other Tuesday. The memory system, which is optimized to catch anomalies rather than log routines, quietly stops paying close attention, the same way you stop noticing a hum in the background of a room until it suddenly stops. Then one meeting goes sideways. A deadline gets blown in front of a client. Or, on the flip side, someone pulls off a genuinely spectacular save under pressure. Either way, something unusual just happened, and the brain does exactly what it did with the red word. It grabs on. It replays it. It becomes, whether anyone intends this or not, the story people tell. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you if you manage people. That one afternoon might be 1 out of 200 working days in a year. 200 days of ordinary competence, quietly erased by 90 minutes that simply looked different from everything around them. Think about what that actually means in a review cycle. You sit down to evaluate 2 people. Employee A has been rock solid all year. No fireworks, no disasters, no viral wins, just steady, reliable output that never gave anyone a reason to think twice. Employee B has one legendary quarter. Maybe they closed a huge deal in front of the whole leadership team, or fixed an outage everyone was panicking about, live, on a call, with half the company watching the incident channel refresh in real time. But underneath that one dramatic moment, B's actual year-round output is shakier. More missed details, more work that had to be quietly redone by someone else, more small fires that never made it into any story at all. Guess who tends to walk away with the better rating? It's usually B. Not because B did more, or better, work over the full year. Because B did one thing that was memorable, and A did nothing memorable at all, by design, because A's whole approach to the job is to prevent memorable things from happening in the first place. That's the cruelest twist in this whole effect, and it's worth sitting with for a second. The employees who are best at preventing crises are the ones least likely to be remembered for preventing them. There's no dramatic story attached to a disaster that never occurred. Nobody tells the tale of the fire that didn't start. Meanwhile, the person who shows up during the fire, even if their own earlier carelessness helped start it, becomes the hero of the narrative simply because there was a narrative to begin with, and the other person never gave anyone one. There's a version of this you've probably seen outside of work too, which makes it easier to trust that it's real and not just office folklore. Think about a household where one parent handles bedtime, homework, meals, and every unglamorous logistical detail day after day without incident. Think about the other parent who shows up once for a single spectacular outing, a surprise trip, or an elaborate birthday party, and gets talked about for years afterward. Nobody sat down and decided that the quiet daily effort mattered less. It's just that the daily effort produced no contrast, day to day, while the one spectacular outing broke sharply from everything around it. The brain filed them accordingly, unfairly, and completely on autopilot. Picture 2 very different employees on the same team, if that helps make it concrete. One spends months quietly patching, testing, and hardening things so nothing ever breaks where customers can see it. The other lets things get a little sloppy, then swoops in during an actual crisis at an inconvenient hour and heroically fixes everything while everyone watches. Both of them, in a very real sense, did their jobs that year, but only one of them handed the manager's brain something to remember, and it wasn't the one who made sure the crisis never happened. This is where it's worth pausing to say something a little uncomfortable, because it's the part most performance review conversations quietly skip over. A lot of what gets celebrated inside companies as great crisis management is actually just a highlight reel of problems that shouldn't have needed managing in the first place. The applause goes to whoever shows up in the dramatic third act. Nobody applauds the person who made sure there wasn't a third act, because from the outside, a year with no third act just looks like a quiet, uneventful year. It isn't only performance reviews either. Watch how this plays out the first time two strangers meet in a job interview. An interviewer sits through 6 competent, forgettable conversations in a row, and then one candidate says something slightly odd, tells one unusually vivid story, or stumbles into one memorable exchange that has nothing to do with actual job skill. That candidate is the one the interviewer will describe in detail a week later, while the 5 competent, forgettable candidates blur together into a single vague impression of fine, I guess. The interview process is supposed to measure who can do the job best. In practice, it often just measures who managed to break the pattern of an otherwise repetitive afternoon, which is a completely different thing dressed up to look like the same thing. Sports broadcasting runs on this same trick, and it's a useful place to see it clearly because nobody's job depends on getting it right. Announcers will spend an entire broadcast praising the player who made one spectacular highlight reel play, while barely mentioning the player who was positioned correctly on every single one of 40 unremarkable plays that quietly kept the other team from scoring. The spectacular play gets replayed in slow motion from 4 camera angles. The 40 quiet, correct positions get replayed exactly 0 times because there's nothing dramatic to show. Anyone who has ever argued about who actually deserved an award that season has run headfirst into this exact effect without necessarily having a name for it. Now, if you're a manager reading this and telling yourself you're immune to it because you're aware of the concept, that's exactly the trap to watch for. Awareness of a cognitive bias doesn't automatically cancel it out. Knowing that an optical illusion is an illusion doesn't stop your eyes from seeing it anyway. The von Restorff effect isn't a belief you hold and can simply talk yourself out of. It's a property of how your memory system files information in the first place, and that filing happens long before your careful, rational judgment ever gets a say in the matter. By the time review season arrives and you sit down to think things through properly, your memory has already handed you a distorted, pre-edited set of raw materials to think with. So, what actually happens inside a typical review conversation? You try to recall someone's year. Your brain doesn't hand you a spreadsheet, it hands you scenes. A tense meeting, a slipped deadline, a moment where someone either impressed you or let you down in a way that felt vivid at the time. Those scenes arrive preloaded with emotional weight, because emotional intensity is part of what makes something memorable in the first place, and your brain treats emotional weight as a stand-in for importance. It isn't the same thing, it just feels like it, in the moment. Which is exactly why it's so easy to mistake one for the other. Here's the part nobody expects though, and it's worth slowing down for, because this is where the effect stops being a minor quirk of memory and starts quietly shaping actual careers. It doesn't just distort how you remember other people, it distorts how you remember yourself. Ask yourself, honestly, what your own best and worst moments at work were this year. Chances are you can name a specific meeting, a specific email, a specific mistake, or a specific win, in vivid detail, down to who was in the room. Chances are you cannot name a single thing you did on some random, unremarkable Wednesday 11 months ago, even though that Wednesday was one of roughly 200 working days that actually made up your year, and was in no meaningful way less important than the day you happen to remember. Your own self-image is built out of exactly the same highlight reel logic you're applying, half-consciously, to everyone else. Which means when you compare yourself to a colleague, or quietly decide whether you deserve a promotion this cycle, you're not comparing 2 full years of work. You're comparing 2 highlight reels, each edited by an unreliable narrator who never meant to be unreliable in the first place. And this cuts, in a second, genuinely useful direction, if you happen to be the one being evaluated rather than the one doing the evaluating. If dramatic, visible moments are what get remembered, then quietly doing excellent work in the background without ever creating a single visible moment is a strategy that will systematically undersell you, no matter how good the actual work is. That isn't an argument for manufacturing fake crises just so you can look heroic solving them, which would be its own kind of self-defeating game. It's an argument for making your steady, competent, unglamorous work visible on purpose, instead of quietly assuming that good, consistent results speak for themselves. They don't, unfortunately. Only unusual results speak for themselves without any help. Ordinary excellence has to be narrated, out loud, occasionally, or it disappears into the background exactly the way a black word disappears on a page full of other black words. There's an even stranger wrinkle buried inside all of this, and it has to do with timing rather than drama alone. The von Restorff effect doesn't just favor unusual events over ordinary ones. It also tends to favor whichever unusual event happened most recently. That means a single dramatic failure in the weeks right before a review can outweigh an even more dramatic win from 8 or 9 months earlier, purely because of where it happened to land on the calendar, and not because of anything connected to how good the actual work was across the year. Two people can have functionally identical years in every meaningful sense, and the one whose single bad meeting happened to fall in a bad month, right before the review, walks in carrying a heavier story for reasons that have nothing to do with performance at all. It's worth adding, too, that this same trick runs on the blame side of the ledger just as ruthlessly as it runs on the credit side. A single visible mistake, especially one made in front of the wrong audience, can outweigh years of quietly excellent, careful, boring work in exactly the same way that one dramatic win can outweigh years of quietly average work. The employee who has never once caused a visible problem, but who makes one avoidable error at the worst possible moment, in front of the worst possible people, can end up remembered almost entirely for that single afternoon, which means the punishment side of memory is just as unfairly weighted as the reward side, and most people only ever notice the reward side because it's more flattering to worry about who got overpraised than who got overblamed. So, what do you actually do about this? If you manage people and you don't want your ratings to be a referendum on whichever single moment happened to be the most dramatic one that year. The fix isn't complicated, but it does require actively overriding your own gut, on purpose, every single time, because your gut will not fix itself just because you now know the name of the bias behind it. Do not trust your memory when review season arrives. Your memory was never built to be a fair, evenly weighted archive of a full working year. It was built to flag anomalies and let routine competence fade quietly into the background, because from a purely evolutionary standpoint, spotting the thing that broke the pattern used to be what kept people alive, while the boring, repeated, safe stuff never needed flagging at all. That wiring is ancient. It has absolutely no idea what a quarterly performance review is, and it was never designed to produce one fairly, because fairness was never its job to begin with. So instead of asking your memory what stands out, go pull the actual record instead. Tickets closed, projects shipped, targets hit, tracked across the entire period in question, not just the last dramatic week of it that happens to be freshest in your head. Build the picture from what genuinely happened, consistently, across every ordinary day, rather than from the small handful of days your brain happened to file under memorable for reasons that had more to do with contrast than with actual value delivered. Practically, that might mean keeping a running log throughout the year instead of trying to reconstruct one from scratch the week before reviews are due, because reconstruction is precisely where this bias does its damage. It might mean asking each person on your team to send a short monthly summary of what they actually shipped, so the ordinary months leave a paper trail instead of dissolving silently into the background, the way ordinary months always do. It might mean, before you finalize any rating, deliberately asking yourself a pointed question. Am I rating this person's whole year? Or am I rating one afternoon that happened to be unusually loud? Those are not the same question, even though they feel identical in the moment, and only one of them is the question a fair review is actually supposed to answer. It's also worth building the same check into how you handle blame, not just credit, since the two are wired by the exact same mechanism. Before you let one dramatic mistake define someone's reputation for the next year, Go check what the other 199 days look like. Sometimes the record will confirm the story your memory is telling you. Often, it won't. And that gap between the story and the record is exactly where careers get decided unfairly, quietly, without anyone involved ever intending it. That one meeting where a deadline got blown will still be in there somewhere in the record, and it should be, because it's real information and it did happen. It's just not the whole story, and it was never fair to let it carry the entire weight of someone's year all on its own, the way memory alone would have quietly let it do. Your brain kept a highlight reel. Highlight reels are compelling, which is exactly the problem with them. They're also, by design, incomplete, cherry-picked for drama rather than accuracy, and genuinely useless as a fair record of 200 ordinary days that simply didn't make the cut. If you're going to decide who gets the raise, who gets the promotion, or who quietly gets written off this cycle as merely fine, do it from the ledger, not the highlight reel, because somewhere on your team right now, there's a person having a perfectly ordinary, perfectly excellent Tuesday, and it is already fading out of memory before the day is even over, replaced by nothing at all. Which is exactly the point, and exactly the problem. If this changed the way you'll walk into your next review, on either side of the table, hit follow, because there's a lot more of this quiet wiring behind workplace fairness still to unpack.